What's going on, everybody? So welcome back to part 2 of the S13 single cam KA turbo build. Now today's episode we're going to try to get the oil feed and the oil drain situated. We're also going to probably try to mock up the downpipe and see if that's going to fit properly with all the AC stuff. Now a little disclaimer on this one, guys, it's going to take a little bit longer than normal because this customer wants to retain all of his factory accessories. This car needs to run like factory, drive like factory, the AC needs to work, everything needs to be there. So there's going to be a lot of heat wrap and stuff. There's going to be a lot of just tedious little things that you normally wouldn't get if you were just building a drift car. So it's going to take us a little bit longer. But Mr. UPS man showed up this morning. We got our steel oil drain fitting so that we can weld that into the oil pan. That's going to get an interesting one. That, it's another one of those don't try this at home things. And then we also have the 90-degree fitting for the oil feed. So right now we're going to get that 90-degree fitting on there, and we're going to get the oil feed situated, and then we'll lift the car up and I'll bring you guys in and how I'm going to do this oil drain. Alright guys, so I don't know, move the camera a little bit, hopefully you can see what's going on here. So we needed this 90-degree fitting because with this hose, when you put this hose on and then you try to close the hood, it bends over, it kinks, and you're going to lose and starve your turbo for oil. So we got this fitting, which is a 90-degree, which will actually screw right onto here like so. And then we can take this line, and we're going to route it probably around the front of the motor here, just so there's access to it. And then we can screw this on to here. So now, if we play our cards right and we route this properly, which we got a little bit of extra slack, so we'll probably just end up routing it around here like so. And now basically once we tighten this thing down, it should stay by itself. Let me grab a wrench. Alright, there we go. So now our oil feed is run, and we'll make a bracket or something to hold this here so it stays all nice and looks good. But that takes care of our oil feed. We got the Mishimoto setup down here, the oil filter adapter is all set, that's all tightened up. We got our line coming up here, our dash 4 touching right in the top of here. Now we need to get underneath the car and actually do the drain. Alright guys, so the oil drain is going to go right about in this direction right here. We're going to get it as high up on the oil pan as we possibly can so that it doesn't really interfere with too much. I usually like to get them on the block if I possibly can, but there's nothing there. There's no way to get it into the block, and this block is cast iron, so it makes drilling it even easier, or more difficult rather. But what we're going to do is something a little bit different. Now, pulling down this oil pan is a royal pain in the ass. You have to pull the sway bar out, you have to pull the motor up a little bit, you got to get all the bolts out, you have to get all these braces off the back by the transmission here. So it's kind of a pain in the ass. Now, the way that I've done them is definitely a don't try this at home method. I'll drain all the oil out, we'll clean all this up, we'll get all the oily residue off of it. Once we've got all the oily residue off of it, I'll purge the entire engine with air to get any kind of oil vapor out of it. Then we'll drill a hole, we'll pop this on, and we'll just do quick little tack welds all the way around it until we've got it fully welded. And once we've got it fully welded, we should be good to go. We'll blow the engine out one more time, make sure nothing's going on. Now this won't hurt the engine, and you may get a little bit of a puff back from the oil vapor that's in the motor, and it can get a little bit dangerous, so you do have to be careful. I wouldn't recommend doing this if you haven't done it before. I've done it on several occasions, and I know a lot of you guys are going to yell at me and say you can't do that, you got to take the pan off, but I like to live a little bit dangerously. I've done it a million times. It's definitely not the correct way to do it, but it saves a ton of time, and it ultimately saves your customer a shit ton of money. So we're going to start by draining the oil out. Once we drain the oil out, we'll get we'll get everything cleaned up here so that we don't have any risk of fire. Then we'll drill a hole and we'll weld this puppy right in here. So I'm gonna go drain the oil now. Alright, so oil's draining. Luckily there wasn't much in it, so unfortunately I just realized I'm out of brake cleaner, so we're gonna have to wait a little bit for the brake cleaner to arrive so that we can clean all this garbage up, drill our hole, and weld in that bung. And then I'll take you guys through making the actual hose and all that other stuff, and we'll get the oil drain completely situated. So as soon as the brake cleaner comes in, we'll be back. Alright guys, now we got our hole center punched right here. We got all the schmutz cleaned off of this oil pan. We're going to drill the hole in here very carefully so we don't get any chips down in. And I like drilling them here too, because if we do get some chips down in there, we can you know, kind of flush them out through the drain over here. But we're going to drill this. I'm going to throw a little bit of grease on the actual bit so it catches some of the shavings. But other than that, we should be good to go here. So let me get some grease on this thing and I'll come drill it real quick. Alright guys, we picked a good spot. We're right above a baffle, which is awesome. The hole is nice and deburred. Looks pretty good. We're going to clean that surface up a little bit so that we can weld to it. We'll clean it up again real quick. We'll blow a little bit of air in there just to kind of clean out the residue, and then we'll weld our fitting in. Alright, so everything is cleaned up now. We're going to basically weld this fitting right in here, like so. We'll get it tacked up in place and we'll run little tacks all the way around it so that we can do this without overheating anything or causing any major catastrophes or anything like that. So I'm going to get this centered on here and then I'll start welding it in. Alright guys, I'm going to set you up on the welder, so excuse the noise. Wow, we got some shit on the screen. We're going to set it up on the welder so that you guys can see it. I can't find my regular tripod, I don't know where it went. But I'm going to set you up, we're going to weld this thing in real quick, and yeah, we'll go from there. And there it is, all welded in, all cleaned up, good to go. We now have our drain fitting, so now we can run from up there where the turbo is down to here to the drain fitting. So we're going to make our hose now. Now guys, I mean this when I say it, wholeheartedly. I do not recommend putting in your drain fitting this way. I've done them on several occasions and had pretty good luck. I did have one go kaboom on me though. Wasn't a big deal, just scared everybody around me. However, I do not take responsibility if you decide to do this and you create some form of 4-alarm fire. Beware of what you're doing. Do not clean the inside of the pan with brake clean. Do not get the brake clean anywhere else but where you're doing. Make sure everything is dry before you start welding. Please don't do it this way. Take the pan off, weld it in the correct way. I do these like this all the time because I've done a bunch of them. I know what I'm looking for. I have the proper fire safety equipment. I did the proper purge of the actual crankcase. Just be careful and don't do it. We need to make our actual drain fitting on our drain line. So now we've got some steel braided line here, which hopefully we have enough of it. And then we've got our Dash 10 AN 45 degree fitting that's going to go with the turbo. Now these normally people find them to be hard and difficult, but these fittings are nice. I don't know if you can see inside there, it's threaded. When we go to screw this down on the actual tube itself, it will thread all the way down to where it bottoms out inside here, and then I'll show you guys a little trick for getting these things to go together. First things first, we're going to screw this onto the hose. Alright, now if you can see inside there, the hose is bottomed out up against the back side of this fitting. That's where we want it to be. Now we need to put this fitting in the vise, and I usually just use, I don't have the soft jaws for this vise. I usually just use a piece of cardboard and you can wrap it around the fitting and then stick your fitting in the vise, just so you don't mar it up. I mean, in this case you're never going to see it, so it's not a huge deal, but it's always nice to try to save the fitting a little bit. Alright, now you don't want to squeeze it in the vise too hard, because if you squeeze it too hard you'll make this oblong and it'll be very difficult to get this fitting down inside. Now the easiest way that I found to do these is to make sure that this surface is 100% smooth. It does have a taper on it. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to lube up the inside of the hose with a little bit of motor oil, lube up this side with a little bit of motor oil, then we'll push down and we'll crank on it and make sure that it gets seated properly. I lubricate the threads as well so that it threads in a little bit easier. And you don't need to be stingy with the oil here. You kind of want to be liberal with it. This hose is going to have oil going through it anyway, so not a huge deal. So we'll get that down in there, and you want to push it down until the threads start. Hold on to it and then start screwing it in. And then one thing you want to be very conscious of is when you're making these fittings, if you start to screw this fitting in and you see the hose backing out down here, it means it didn't grab all the way and you need to rethink how you did this, maybe take it apart and redo it again and reseat everything. So now I'm going to grab a big adjustable so we can crank the rest of this down and we'll be good. Alright, so you kind of want to crank it down until it bottoms out, but again, keep an eye down here to make sure your hose isn't coming out of there, and you'll feel it getting tighter and tighter. And then once you bottom out this fitting, which should be coming shortly, right about there, you want to just give it a quick little yeah, and that's it. You're good. Your fitting is made, your hose is made. There we go. And now we can actually fit this on the bottom of the turbo and snake it down to where we just welded in that fitting on the oil pan. We now have the line running off of the turbo. I don't know if you could see that fitting up in there, but we ran a 45 degree to kind of kick it away from the exhaust. A lot of mistake people make with their drain line is it gets too close to the exhaust and the drain line ends up collapsing internally. Even though this is steel braided, there is still basically a Teflon coated line inside of this. And if it gets too hot, it will melt internally and it will collapse, thus rendering your drain useless. Eventually all the oil will back up in the turbo, which will cause the seals to blow, and it'll actually shorten the life of your turbo. So now what we need to make a decision about is, do we want to use a 45-degree fitting and come straight down and in like this, or do we want to use a straight fitting and come directly in? Now my thought is, if we use the 45, we get a shorter distance here and we have less of a bend in it, which will stop a lot of things from happening. So I think we're going to go with the 45 on this one. So I'm going to put the 45 on there, measure up that tube, mark the tube real quick, then we'll go cut it, and we'll put this fitting on just like we did with the other one. So if we want that, we're going to want to cut that just a hair long so we got some room. Yeah, we'll cut it right about there. Guys, this is so hard to do while you're filming, just FYI. Alright, so we got that marked. I'm going to take it back off, cut it, and then once we cut it, we'll put that second fitting on there, and then we'll put everything back together. Little pro tip for you guys who might be new to this kind of stuff and are working with braided line for the first time: cutting it. Cutting it can be a nightmare. The easiest way to cut any kind of braided line, whether it be stainless, nylon, Kevlar, you name it, is mark where you're going to cut it, wrap a couple of wraps of electrical tape before the cut. So you always want to cut off after the tape. Take your angle grinder and just hit it with the angle grinder. It makes an awful smell, but once you remove this tape carefully, you get a nice, clean, non-frayed cut that your fitting will fit right over. Just a little tip. Alright guys, well there's your oil drain. Wow, that was high. Alright guys. But anyway, there's your oil drain. Right into the side of the pan, runs up around the AC compressor, right into the bottom of the turbo. It's away from the exhaust manifold, it's away from anything that could harm it, and it's in a really, really good spot. So I'm happy with that. We managed to get right above a baffle on the pan, so the oil that'll be dropping back into the pan will be baffled, which is awesome. And yeah, we got a great angle on that tube. It comes straight down in, which is great. We don't want any kind of residuals hanging out in there, because that oil can tend to coke up a little bit if you leave it in there too hot. So angles are good, we're good there. Again guys, like I said to you, don't try that little welding trick at home. I like to say or think that I'm a professional and I've done these things before, but even for me that's kind of a dumb move. So be careful with whatever you're doing. It's best to pull the oil pan. It would be better to take it in instead of make it in, but this works without having to yank the motor. If we were freshening up this motor and pulling it out, I most definitely would have tigged it in off the actual motor itself. But time is of the essence, cost effectiveness is of the essence, and this was the best method. So we got that oil drain in. I think I'm going to end the video here because it's already pretty long. I tried to go a little bit more in depth with each one of these steps because I know there's a lot of builds out there, but nobody really takes the time to explain every last little bit of things. And I don't know, if you guys like it, you do. If you don't, you don't. But I figure if I can give you guys the most information possible on these things, then yeah, we're good from there. But just to give you a quick one before I leave, the fitting that we put on the turbo, the 90-degree -4 AN fitting, as well as the weld bung that we put on the oil pan, were not supplied in the kit. These are the little ancillary items that you're going to need when you go to do a turbo kit like this off of eBay. Some of the kits come with it, some of the kits don't. But just be prepared to buy more stuff because these kits are not complete. And you'll see more of that when we get into mocking up the downpipe and the exhaust, and when we start doing the intercooler stuff and everything else. You're going to see we're probably going to have to modify quite a bit of stuff to get everything to fit right. So that's it for today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Please like, comment, subscribe. Thank you to all of you who are watching my videos. I appreciate every single one of you guys, and we'll see you on the next one.